No. Can you hear me? Hello?
The time is now 7:30 p.m. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Old Bridge Township Zoning Board of Adjustment for May 18th, 2023. I am James Sullivan, the chairman of the board, and I would ask you now to join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, the flag of our country. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Justice for.
Adequate notice of this meeting of the Old Bridge Township Zoning Board of Adjustment has been provided in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act at least 48 hours prior to the commencement of this meeting by prominently posting in the municipal complex an announcement giving the time, the date, the location, and the agenda of this meeting. Also by mailing such announcement to the Home News and Tribune, filing a copy of such announcement with the municipal clerk, and posting the agenda on the township's website. Ms. C, can we have a roll call, please?
Certainly. Chairman
you.
Sullivan,
Here.
Mr. Connor,
Here.
Mr. Stoner,
Here.
Ms. Chevalier,
Here.
Mr. Scagno,
Here.
Ms. Andrews, I know is having technical difficulties right now. Hopefully we'll get her on. Ms. Testaverde.
Here.
And Mr. Izzo is absent. Mr. Clancy,
Present.
Mr. Gill,
Here.
and myself, Ms. C. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. C. This meeting obviously is being conducted electronically as a webinar via the internet. It is unique. It does take patience on all involved because we're not sitting in the courtroom next to each other and spacing our applicants. But we're doing so from our own homes or own offices. The meeting is simultaneously being televised by OBTV Channel 15, as well as YouTube Live. I remind all those watching on any device that there is up to a 30-second delay in communication. This will be important to remember if you wish to personally join the public portion of the meeting. Anyone calling in must lower their device, otherwise you'll be confused by the time delay. I would ask all participants here in the Zoom meeting, please silence your cell phones. And those who are going to be testifying tonight, please silence your cell phones so we avoid any disturbances during the meeting. We follow the same protocols as if we were in the courtroom. There are general housekeeping issues tonight to start with. We have 2 applications. While there is 3 on the agenda, the third one not be heard. I will call that in a few moments. I don't anticipate any recess tonight, but should there be, we will notify you at home. Ms. C, would you pick up and help me out on anything I may have missed?
Sure. Just a few reminders. The zoning board members will be unmuted during the first half of the meeting. Will be required to vote on other agenda items. The zoning board attorney, chairman, and secretary will remain unmuted throughout the meeting. Everyone else will be muted. Once the presentation for the application begins, the applicant's professionals will be asked to turn on their video and unmute themselves in the order in which they will testify. For the public, I will announce the last 4 digits of the caller's phone number to come forward and announce their name and address. I will also announce the last 4 digits of the next caller's phone number so that they can be prepared. We will share our screen to display any exhibits. The meeting information will be displayed on the screen multiple times during the meeting so that any resident who wishes to call in and join the meeting can do so. Please be patient. You will have an opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. C. As I mentioned, the agenda does list 3 applications this evening. However, the third one on the list will not be heard. I'm just going to read that into the record at this juncture. So in case you're interested in it, there's no reason for you to sit around and watch tonight. 25-2023Z, it's William Montemerno, I'm sorry. It's in the R5 zone, block 61, lot 458, the physical location 458 Harding Road. That's for a deck. That matter has been carried to June 15th, 2023 with further notice. So if that's the matter you were looking at that you wanted to comment on or you were interested in, it will not be heard this evening. it will be on the schedule for June 15th, 2023. Thank you. We'll go back to the agenda then in its order as written. Board members, we have 3 copies of minutes. I'll take them each individually. The first one would be March 2nd, 2023. They need to be adopted. I would ask if absent anyone making any comments, hopefully you've read them. For corrections or deletions, I'd ask someone to move it for adoption.
I'll move it, Stoner.
Is there a second?
Connor, I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Stoner,
Yes.
Ms. Chevalier,
Yes.
Mr. Scogno,
Yes.
Ms. Testaverde,
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan.
Yes. The same applies, board members, minutes of March 16th, 2023. Will someone move that for adoption?
I'll move it, Stoner.
Is there a second?
Second, Scogno.
Moved in second, roll call, please.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Stoner,
Yes.
Ms. Chevalier,
Yes.
Mr. Scogno,
Yes.
Ms. Testaverde,
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan.
Yes. And finally, the third copy would be minutes of April 20, 2023. Same applies. Would someone move it for adoption?
Connor, I'll
Stoner.
move it.
Second, Stoner.
Connor and Mr. Stoner in that order. Roll call, please.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Stoner,
Yes.
Ms. Chevalier,
Yes.
Mr. Scogno,
Yes.
Ms. Testaverde,
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan.
Yes. Before I move into the next category, I'll apologize to anybody who's watching from home and has never participated. When we're here in our own homes, I happen to have a parrot, and that's what you hear going on in the background screaming. So there's nothing nefarious going on in my home. It's only the parrot being unruly at the time. We'll move to item number 4. It's resolutions. We'll put Mr. Clancy to work now. The first one we're going to call is 53-2022Z Grayson Road Holdings LLC. It was a major preliminary final site plan with the variance. Mr. Clancy.
Yes, good evening, everyone. I know the board members have received a copy of this in advance. This is application 53-2022Z. It is for major preliminary and final site plan, a D variance application, along with that which has been approved by the board. This was opened up to public comment back on March 4th, 2023. The board reviewed the evidence presented and has approved this. There are a number of conditions which are contained within the resolution itself under number 3 of the resolutions. Those are incorporated in the approval of this application. Mr. Chairman, you can push this for a vote.
Thank you, Mr. Clancy. Board members, you've heard the resolution. Someone move for adoption, please.
Testaverde, I'll move it.
Is there a second?
Second, Scott.
Second by Mr. Scogno. Roll call, please.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Stoner,
Yes.
Ms. Chevalier,
Yes.
Mr. Scogno,
Yes.
Ms. Testaverde,
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan.
Yes. 03-2023Z Patricia Brush, C variance. Mr. Clancy.
Yes, this is for an application that we heard at our last C variance meeting back in April. This is for 4009 Englishtown Road in Old Bridge. It is application number 3-2023Z. This was for C variance approval. The board heard testimony from the applicant. During the course of that meeting, a vote was called and this was approved 20th day of April 2023. This is being submitted tonight for final resolution approval, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you again, Mr. Clancy. Board members, you've heard the resolution. Would someone please move it for adoption?
Connor, I'll move it.
Is there a second?
A second, Stoner.
Second by Mr. Stoner. Roll call, please.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Stoner,
Yes.
Ms. Chevalier,
Yes.
Mr. Scogno,
Yes.
Ms. Testaverde,
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan.
Yes. 11-2023Z Yuri Popovich, C variance. Mr. Clancy.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this was another application that was heard by the board on April 20th, 2023. It's a C variance relief for the property located at 106 McCormick Avenue South in Old Bridge. It was application number 11-2023Z. The board heard testimony from the applicant on that date and did call for a vote. the application was subsequently approved, and it is here before us tonight for final resolution. There are some conditions in here, but nothing out of the ordinary. So it is presented for final approval tonight, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Clancy. Board members, someone want to move it, please?
I'll move it, Stoner.
Is there a second?
I'll second Connor.
Thank you very much. Roll call, please.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Stoner,
Yes.
Ms. Chevalier,
Yes.
Mr. Scogno,
Yes.
Ms. Testaverde,
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan.
Yes, we're on the home stretch, Mr. Clancy. 12-2023Z, Kathy Vesey, C variance.
Yes, this is another application that the board heard on the April 20th, 2023 meeting. This is approving bulk variance relief to the applicant Kathy Vesey for her property over at 226 Utica Avenue in Old Bridge. It was for C variance relief as well. Board heard testimony from the applicant in relation to this structure at the rear of her property. And the board did vote that evening, and the application was subsequently approved. There is some conditions contained at the end of the resolution, which have been memorialized 1 through 6, and it is presented tonight for final approval of the resolution, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Clancy. You've heard the resolution, board members. Please, someone move it.
I'll move it, Stoner.
Okay, Mr. Stoner moves it. Is there a second?
Testaverde.
Ms. Testaverde, roll call, please.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Stoner,
Yes.
Ms. Chevalier,
Yes.
Mr. Scogno,
Yes.
Ms. Testaverde,
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan.
Yes, and finally 19-2023Z, Wasim Siraj, C variance. Mr. Clancy.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the last one that was approved on the April 20th, 2023 meeting by the board. This was bulk variance relief granted to the applicant Wasim Siraj for his property over at 11 Farragut Lane in Old Bridge under application number 19-2023. This was legalizing a deck that had been installed over there. The application was put forth by the homeowner, and the board did call for a vote that evening. This application was approved at the April 20th, 2023 meeting. Copies of these are provided ahead of time to the board, and it's here tonight for final resolution approval. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Clancy. Board members, someone want to move that, please, for adoption?
I'll move it, Stoner.
Well, thank you, Mr. Stoner. Is there a second?
Connor, I'll second.
Connor seconds. Okay, thank you very much. Roll call, please.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Stoner,
Yes.
Ms. Chevalier,
Yes.
Mr. Scogno,
Yes.
Ms. Testaverde,
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan.
Yes. All right, board, that moves us to our two applications for the evening. They are both C variances. I'm going to read the first one in order. It's 14. This is a continuation from April 20th. 14-2023Z, Sabrina Gaudio Finn. This is the low density residential R40. This is block 20000, lot 1, 26 Pleasant Valley Road. Requiring a C variance for a storage shed. Miss, I see, okay, Miss Finn, or is it Miss Gaudio? Finn, okay. You are still under oath from the last time, but I noticed that someone else is there. Is that person going to be testifying then?
Yes,
The board attorney will have to swear him in, okay?
that's fine.
Thank you. Mr. Clancy.
Good evening, sir. Can you raise your right hand?
Good
Do you
evening, guys.
There you go. Do you solemnly swear that any testimony you provide before the board this evening will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir.
Okay, you put your hand down, and if you would just state your name for the record, please.
Sean Finn.
Thank you, Sean.
Mr. Finn, were you familiar, were you listening to the last application when this first came up?
Yes, sir. I apologize to everyone for not being available. I had to work that night, so I heard it through the phone call, but I wasn't able to attend. I apologize.
Okay, so you're up to speed on what has happened and what was questioned, right?
Yes, sir. And I'm here to answer any. My wife did as best job as she could answering most of the questions. A lot of the questions were great questions. I'm here to put any answers to anything that anybody had. I'm here to help alleviate any questions or concerns about what's planned and what's going on.
Yes, thank you, sir. And your wife did a great job, by the way, for being a non-professional. So
Thanks.
she got pretty much everything done. We did have a question about the fuel. And
Yes.
before I do that, I'm going to ask Mr. Gill what we found out. Okay?
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, board members, members of the public. So I did get an opportunity to have a conversation with our fire subcode official, Keith Brennan, and assistant construction official in the building department to discuss the concerns that the board had. I sent an email to Keith documenting our conversation. I did kind of want to get a response back from him. However, that conversation happened today in anticipation of this meeting, and I didn't get an opportunity to get a response from him. But this is generally, and I'm willing to put on the record, what we discussed. And just to be clear, I'd like to read it into the record, Chairman, if you'll permit me.
By all means, Mr. Gill.
All right, it was to Keith Brennan, CCing Natalie Say and Maureen Porcelli from the planning office. The subject is storage of fuel in residential garage and pole barns. Good morning. Per our discussion, I'm writing you this email to briefly document our conversation. As I stated, the board is considering an application for an 1,800 to 1,900 square foot detached structure for the storage of vehicles and race cars the homeowner owns. The board raised concerns about the storage of fuel from the perspective of fire safety. My takeaway from our conversation is there's no limit to the amount of storage of fuel that is permitted in a structure of this type. However, the code does regulate dispensing tanks, which usually start at 275 gallons of fuel and are fixed fixtures. You mentioned that if the owner wanted to store 275 gallons of fuel in 5-gallon containers, let's say, though perhaps ill-advised, would be permissible under the code. Additionally, the use of gas caddies, which sell in 25 and 30-gallon configurations and are mobile, are also unregulated. I think the best way for the board to proceed is to condition any favorable determination on the condition that no permanent fuel storage is installed, and perhaps restricting the use of gas caddies on the property. Absent this condition, I understand there is no concern above and beyond the normal precautions a homeowner should take when storing fuel in their garages. Please feel free to offer any additional guidance and or conditions that I need to correct so that I can accurately report to the board. So the moral of the story is that in home residential configurations, there really isn't a regulation or a standard where it's like, if you go above this amount of fuel, there's a problem. Obviously, we need to be responsible in the way we store things. And if we store too much of anything that might be flammable or combustible, there could be concerns. I think that the board's concerns about fuel storage are valid. And unless the applicant has an objection, which it didn't sound like they did based on the testimony from last meeting, I would recommend to the board that perhaps a condition of approval, if the board saw fit to approve the application, is to maybe restrict it through a condition to not allow fixed dispensing fuel containers, which at that point would require a construction permit. In much the same way when we do accessory structures, we limit the plumbing or the electrical to avoid the propensity of misuse and things like that. But other than that, the building department and the fire, specifically the fire subcode officials, didn't really have any concerns. And he says if somebody wanted to put in a fuel dispensing tank, they could, just like an oil tank to heat a home or a propane tank to heat the home. It would just be used for a different purpose. In this case, it'd be used for fueling. So if the board has concerns, it can certainly restrict as it sees fit. But there wouldn't be a prohibition through the building department.
All right, well, Mr. Gill, thank you very much for getting that information. It is quite informative. And before I go to the applicant, I'd like to ask Mr. Clancy, would we, if we were to put some sort of a restriction, would that be lawful insofar as there's really apparently there's no cap on how much you could have?
Yeah, well, I think the concern here is that there was testimony revolving around race vehicles and fuel, which is kind of an odd type of fuel that it's different from home heating oil for or ordinary gas for that reason. And I think that was part of the concern, if I heard the board's questions correctly last time around. I don't think the board would be outside of its jurisdiction to prevent certainly fixed storage of this, which would require its own application through the construction board to get an approval for. obviously it's based on what Mr. Gill said here, there's a recommendation on perhaps restricting fuel caddies or portable fuel containers. It's up to the board's discretion on a variance as to whether or not they would felt that was an important basis to include as a restriction as a condition of approval. So it is effectively entirely in the board's hands.
All right. Well, thank you for your guidance. Maybe it's unnecessary. Let's talk to the applicant. Mr. You're Sean Finn or Sean Gaudia?
Sean Finn.
Claudia's my maiden name.
Okay. Sir, why don't you tell us what you're going to do there?
Yeah, fuel is really, I don't want to call it a non-issue, but we have, fuel storage really as far as refilling the vehicles on site. I would, if I had to put a number on it, I would say on hand, we roughly have about 10 gallons of fuel. The race car really doesn't use a lot of fuel. We buy that fuel at the track. It goes bad pretty quickly. It doesn't really have a shelf life, a high storage life. So we typically buy it in 5-gallon drums. It's a metal container that's sealed. We use it in the car at the track. We try to buy as much as only we need. So generally after an event, which is typically once a month, we only have on hand about 1 gallon to 2 gallons. The other fuel that we carry on hand is strictly regular pump fuel. That, you get a regular gas station for your car, for our lawn mowers, weed whackers, stuff like that. But any fuel load that would be on the property is no more than is on it now. Like I said, we're not using it for any commercial use. It's not going to be operated out like a shop would be. It's really just 100% to keep our personal, vehicles, property, pleasure boat, sort of, just in storage. So it's not beat up by, the environment.
More aesthetically pleasing from my property.
And so my wife doesn't have to look at all my junk sitting in the
Right.
backyard.
Well, I'm sure you share our concern, being
Yes.
a family man yourself. I mean, you understand that you wouldn't want to have a fire on your property.
100%. I have a history. Years ago, I was in the fire service. I have 100%. I thought that question was a great question. Yes, I have, utmost, safety aspect. There will be there will be fire extinguishers present in the building, just because, to protect our vehicles. But yeah, as far as the fuel load goes, there'll be no dispensers. At most, it would be 2 5-gallon gas cans, for yard equipment, and stuff like that. And again, these cars don't get driven like, typical vehicles. I mean, to be honest, if we drive them 2 or 3 times a year, that's a good year for us. They're typically broken more than they're on the road. So it's really just for storage aspect of the vehicles. Just so they don't get ruined. That's all.
Okay, and while you were not there last time, your wife explained, I think, what the need for the building was. Would you reinforce and tell us exactly what you're going to use that for? You've already, I think you stated it's not going to be for any commercial purpose, correct?
Negative. No commercial purpose. We just have, over time, we've, accumulated a lot of vehicles. The race car, that process takes a lot of stuff. So I have a truck, a tow vehicle that tows a trailer. The trailer is 28 feet long. So you have a truck trailer. We have a pleasure boat, small boat, it's only 19 feet long, but with the trailer, it's 24 feet. My wife's vehicle, my primary vehicle, the race car. I also have another collector car. We have another 69 Corvette. My father has one vehicle that's here that I keep here, as well as all of our yard furniture. We have a patio set. My son is over here screaming. If you hear him in the background, I'm sorry. He's
our parrot.
he's only 8 years old. But just all the stuff that he's going to accumulate, in bicycles, and just trying to tidy up the property and sort of keep stuff where it doesn't get ruined by the environment. As time goes on, these cars are already 50 years old, so they're already on their second leg. It's just storage space. No no commercial use, no shop, no business, just for us really to try to just keep our stuff in one spot.
Understood, sir. Would you go on the record in saying you would not, you will not rent space to anyone?
Yes, sir. Nope. I don't want,
You would not turn it into any sort of a residence?
no, definitely not. No residents, no renting. Like I said, no commercial, nothing besides personal storage for basically a glorified yard, large shed.
Okay, and I understand you have a big motorhome, so that's why you need the big door to get in, is that pretty much?
Yes, exactly. That 10-foot door, exactly. To get the trailer in the top of the I actually heard that question. I memeasured the top. The top of the trailer is about 9 feet from grade level.
Okay.
And then our larger truck, which is a 2002 3500, that truck is about 8.5 feet from grade level. So that was the purpose of that larger door, was to allow those two vehicles to be able to be stored inside the building.
Okay, your wife indicated that you weren't going to put any electric or plumbing, but wouldn't you think you might want electric anyway for lighting?
Lights, I could possibly see down the line. If that was something that we saw that there wasn't enough lighting, I'm sort of hoping that we're going to be able to have enough lighting from the doors. Being that we have two of them. If down the line it was something that did not, if that wasn't, sustainable, I would, assume to go through the proper channels in order to get some sort of, however we had to do that to get,
You
for
weren't going to
lighting.
put any plumbing in, right?
No plumbing.
Well,
No, we have
Let me
septic.
just refer to Mr. Clancy for a second. Mr. Clancy, wouldn't you be better off asking for the electric now while we have the application here?
You certainly could. I mean, as long as the board didn't have a feeling that they wanted to prohibit that in any way.
Well, we'll find that
Well,
out,
we
but I'm
could-
just trying to, I'm going
Yeah.
to ask the board. But,
Yeah, we could leave it open, and he can just file whatever permits he needs to whenever he gets around to it. Well, as long as it's not having it is not put in as a condition, and we leave it open, I think we're okay.
Okay. Understood, Mr. Finn?
Understood, yes.
Yeah. Let me just ask the board at this point if they have any questions of you. Your wife really did a very good job. So we got most of it in. So let's see if the board members have any further questions, and particularly about the fuel. Mr. Scotno.
Thank you very much, Mr. Flynn. How many different types of fuel are you going to have? You mentioned a boat that runs on diesel. Is that correct?
Negative. The boat, it's a small power boat. It has a regular gasoline engine in it. The only difference in the fuel, typically, boats use an ethanol-free fuel because the ethanol eats away at the gas tank. So that's the only difference as far as a marine fuel. Typically, it has a lower ethanol content as compared to an automotive fuel that you get at your regular gas station.
Yeah. And the racing car, does that run on jet fuel?
No, it runs on a race fuel. It's to explain it, it has a higher octane rating. So when you go to your regular gas pump, you have 87, 91, 93. The octane rating is in the race car is 116. That rating is it has the flammability of the fuel is still the same. It's just the fuel's resistance to burn is what that rating is for. It doesn't make it any, it's like a jet fuel or a diesel. Those fuels don't tend to ignite very well. A diesel, like a home heating oil, is very, number 2 is similar to over-the-road diesel. Those fuel, they classify those as 40, but we don't. We have an oil tank outside for the home. Our home is oil heat, but that won't be stored in the building. That's just, for our home.
Very good. Thank you.
Anybody else on the board questions for the applicants?
Yeah, I have some questions.
Oh, is that Mr. Stoner? Go right ahead.
Yes, it is. So, you say you use high octane fuel, right? It's like you said, it's 116, right? It's just
Yes.
for the cars, correct?
Yeah, just for the one race car. That's all we use that for.
So, but I think in the beginning, correct me if I'm wrong, but you mentioned that they have a small lifespan as
Yes.
far as, so why would you need to store? Because I would think the next time you go to a race, you're not going to use that, right?
No, like I said, we go to races once a month, so roughly. So when they come,
Yeah, when they come back, you still have some left.
yes.
But then
Yes.
would you use that for the next time you go out and race again?
Yes, as long as that time period was roughly a month or two, it'll stay. When I say lifespan, it wouldn't stay good for, say, 2 years.
Oh,
You know,
okay.
you can't use it for 2 years. So roughly the car has a 1.5 gallon fuel tank in it.
Right.
So we typically refill it after every run. We average make about 4 to 5 passes a day when we're at the track. And then when we come home, if we have 1.5 gallons or 2 gallons left over, that will stay in a sealed metal container. Typically, I store that in the trailer right now. And then the next time we go to the track, that's the first fuel that you would use. So
Okay.
you'd use the rest of that, and then you would buy a new 5-gallon pail, and then keep rotating that in as time goes on.
So you keep this in a metal container, typically separated from your regular fuel like you use for gas
Yes.
and all that. Okay.
100%. I could, if the board members need it, I have, and I also wanted to say this, all of this, the fuel load that we carry now is what we've carried since we've owned the property. We have this fuel in the trailer right now. I have the cans in the garage. I believe I have 1 can on hand right now because we haven't raced yet this year. And that's typically all we use. I could show a picture of it, if anyone needs it to feel, to sort of understand a little bit better of what I'm saying. But yeah, it's stored in the metal container. It's the factory container that you buy the fuel. It's what comes from the manufacturer. It's VP Racing Fuels, if anyone would like to look it up or needs to look it up. Yeah, it's a 5-gallon metal container, and that's where any excess fuel would get stored.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stoner. Anybody else on the board? Mr. Gill, I wanted to go back to you because the whole purpose of this exercise was the fact that they want to put up a 1,800 square foot versus where 600 is allowed. So the building itself, we didn't seem to have too much of an issue with. Of course, I want everybody just to remember that the fuel is not the crux of the matter here. The crux of the matter is that it's a variance for a building that's beyond the square footage size. So I just wanted to, Damian, if you had anything further you wanted to say to the board.
I was actually going to, I think Mr. Clancy said it well and hit on what I wanted to kind of just emphasize based on your question, Chairman, was that I think that unless the board had a compelling reason to, I would not necessarily restrict the use of the structure in terms of not allowing electric. I think it would do them a disservice. Having them come back to the board, certainly whatever permits are necessary would be appropriate for them to secure prior to putting that stuff in. But I think based on the discussions that we had and the previous testimony, there really didn't seem to be much of a concern with the size of the structure. The structure is large, but it is a big parcel of land. I do remember, I can't remember which commissioner brought it up, but there was some concerns about whether there should be a drive aisle or some type of gravel path that would lead to the structure. I don't think that that's a bad idea. I think that would reduce some of the tearing up of the lawn, and it would reduce, garbage or not garbage, but like staining and dirt and stuff like that onto the roadways when they do pull those vehicles out. So I thought that was pretty poignant, but I really had nothing else to offer.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. I believe that was Mr. Connor that I think.
I thought it was Mr. Connor, but I didn't want to offend whoever it was.
Yeah, but he doesn't get offended. That's it.
I stand guilty.
Mr. Gaudio, I'm sorry, Mr. Finn. Your wife acquiesced to that request. Are you just going to stand by putting some gravel down so you don't bring tear up the lawn and the mud and bring it on the Pleasant
Yes.
Valley?
Yes, sir. Currently, we have a 200-foot gravel driveway that leads from the road to the midpoint of the property. And like I said, as construction of the building, we have no issue extending that gravel from the current driveway to the front apron of the building, which would be approximately 30 to 40 feet from our existing driveway to the front apron of the building.
Yeah, that's fine, sir. We'll take your word on that. Is there any other board members that would like to be heard on this matter? None? Okay. So we could go for a vote. Do you heard what the township code, the zoning officer said, as well as Mr. Clancy and myself? You probably don't want to say you don't want electric, because if you're here now, why come back again? So even if you don't do it, why don't you get the permission to have it?
Yes, sir.
I think it would be a smarter move, but that's totally up to you.
Yes, sir. Is that just a permit I need to file?
Mr. Gill?
No, Chairman, I just think that we don't have to condition or restrict the use of electrics. If he chooses to do electrics in the future, he just needs to secure a building permit when he wants to do that.
Right. So you don't have to do anything, but at least you'll have the availability, the permission to do so, should you change your mind.
Awesome. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, and then you would have to secure building permits for that.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Board members absent, anything else? I'm going to go to a public portion on this matter now, sir, which we have to conduct. This is matter 14-2023Z. It's located, physical location is 26 Pleasant Valley Road. This is for a shed in excess of the square footage. If you're watching on any device, you'll see in front of you right now a list of phone numbers. If you have any concern or you want to speak to the board about this matter, please dial one of those numbers. Because this will be the only hearing on this matter. This will reach a finality tonight. So now would be your only time if you have public comment. Ms. C, is anyone in queue?
No, Chairman.
Okay, well, let's just give it a little time. Once again, anyone watching, if this matter concerns you and you want to speak about it, now would be the only time to do so, because I'm assuming once I finish with this, the applicant is going to ask me to take a vote from the board. So this would be the final night for this matter. And let me refer to our counsel. Mr. Clancy, do you think we've provided sufficient time?
Yes, I believe we're coming up past the 1 minute mark now. Numbers have been posted. I think it's okay to close the public portion at this point, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Clancy. Ms. C, no one is in queue, correct?
Correct.
I'm going to close the public portion at this time. Is there any final words you'd like to say, sir?
No,
Mr.
no.
Okay.
Just thank you guys for your time.
Okay, and you would like a vote, correct?
Please.
Okay. Board members, this is a C variance for 1,800 square foot where 600 is allowed. Is anyone?
Mr. Chairman, just for a moment, I know we went through 2 sessions on this.
Okay.
I just wanted to do a quick recap on the conditions that I heard discussed, make sure the board's on board with that. From the first session, we had an agreement that should the board act favorably, there would be a 200-foot gravel driveway from what is effectively the front of this building out to the roadway to avoid tracking dirt out onto the road was effectively what that was. And I know the applicant testified a little bit about that tonight. The other condition was that there would be no commercial uses. Number 3 is not to be converted as living space. Then tonight we talked about also, including that this would not be used as a rental space. And that's the last condition I have on here, unless the board has anything additional they'd like to add.
I think that's all of it, Mr. Clancy. Okay, with that in mind, board, is someone in favor of moving this C variance?
Connor, I'll move it.
Chevalier will move it.
Yeah, I saw Ms. Testaverde's hand go up first. I'm going to give her credit for that. And Mr. Connor, you will be the second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Stoner,
Yes.
Ms. Chevalier,
Yes.
Mr. Scogno.
Yes.
Ms. Andrews is present. I can confirm she has been this entire hearing. Ms. Andrews,
Yes.
Ms. Testaverde,
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan.
Yes. You will have a resolution for this next at our next meeting. So you can't start until that resolution is culminated. All right. And then you can apply for any of the permits that you need. So I want to thank both you and your wife for appearing before the board and cooperating and letting us take this one more step to find out about this, the fuel safety. So, and I thank you for your candidness and the information as well.
Thank you, sir. Thank you,
Thank you.
guys.
Have
Thank
a
you
good
very
night.
much.
All right. Best of luck. Good night.
Thank you.
All right, board. The next and final application for the evening is 24-2023Z. It's Jennifer Danielle DeLuca. This is a medium high density R6 zone, block 18054, lot 3, location, physical location, 1 Concord Drive. It's for a deck and a fence requiring C variance. is I'm looking for the applicant. Oh, I see, you, right next to me. Good evening. Are both of you going to be speaking? I see a person sitting next to you.
I'll be speaking, but my husband is here if there's any questions I can't answer.
I think it would probably be best if you could both get sworn in. That way, if he interrupts and wants to blurt out, he'll still be under oath, okay?
That makes sense.
Thank you, Mr. Clancy.
If both of you could just raise your right hand. And do you solemnly swear that any testimony you provide before this board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes. I do.
Okay, you can put your hands down. Ladies first, Jennifer, can you just put your complete name on the record first, please?
Certainly. Jennifer Danelli Del Duca.
Okay, thank you. And I guess it's your husband next to you there. Can you put your name on the record?
Mark Del Duca.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
All right, you've watched these before, I would assume, and if you haven't, I'll give you a quick briefing. You're here before the board. There's certain proofs that we have to hear or be put on the record before the granting of variances. So what we'd like you to do is tell us where you're at, what happened, what you're doing, how you're going to do it, and how did you find yourself here before the board this evening? In your own words. And then what's going to happen is the zoning officer is going to explain to us what you're in violation of, knowing that I think you proceeded on something already. And he'll explain that to us. We may have some questions for you. You may have some questions for us. We'll reach a point, just like in the last application, we'll open it to the public. Did we hear any commentary, either pro or against? And then having done all of that, we'll come to a point where I'm going to ask you if you want me to take a vote. So that's pretty much how it proceeds. We want to try and simplify it for the homeowners without representation. So I'll let you proceed at your own pace. Go right ahead, ma'am.
Great. Good evening. It's nice to see all of you, and I appreciate the opportunity to discuss our two variances this evening. I want to start by also saying that I appreciate the guidance that Damien and the zoning office provided as we were navigating through the process. So about 8 months ago, we did some roof upgrades, one of them being the privacy fence. We had a old, rusted, unattractive chain link fence on the side of our home. We followed the exact line of that existing chain link fence and replaced it with a PVC 6-foot lattice top fence, enclosing part of the side yard, in an effort to maximize our narrow yard space for both our family and our kids. Before we did anything, we made sure to ring our two neighbors adjacent sides of us doorbells and just communicating with them, letting them know what we were planning to do, if they had any objections to it. They were all for it, and they were actually happy because they obviously get the benefit of the fence. What we didn't realize was that we needed a zoning permit. And we were under the assumption, I guess we didn't do good enough research, that since there was a fence existing already and we were just kind of replacing it, that it wasn't necessary. So our fence permit was subsequently denied because from what we found out from the ordinance is that the way our house is situated on the corner and the way the ordinance is written, the side of our home is actually not considered to be a side yard, but instead a front yard. So even though my address is 1 Concord Drive, the side of my home is the front yard. So there are numerous homes in my development that are situated also with the similar privacy fence and setup. And I've enclosed some examples for you guys in the packet that I submitted, just so you can, as a reference point. The fence has been in place probably for about 7 months now. It doesn't obstruct the view from the corner. I've also enclosed photos of that so you can see where it's situated and the line of sight. And I guess that's really it. Being on the corner lot and having these unique circumstances, we're seeking a variance to maintain the privacy fence on the side of our home so we could have more reasonable use of our property.
Okay, and as to the deck?
Okay, you want me to go over the deck now? Sure.
Sure.
So one of the other projects we started I guess it's dangerous when you start doing things on yourself, then you start looking for the next thing. So one of the things we did was we had and somewhat unstable deck that existed in our backyard. And we decided to replace it and expand it in the process.
Well, we didn't replace it. We left the existing deck
The structure.
and we added on to it,
Yes.
making it larger. We didn't knock the old structure down.
See, I knew you were going to testify. Go right ahead, continue.
So, again, lack of awareness, we didn't realize we needed a permit. So for full disclosure and transparency, the footings and the open structure of the deck are already in place. Once the zoning office reached out to us, letting us know that about the permit issue, we paused the project immediately. So the permit was denied. And from what I understood, the permit is the setback of the deck is too close to the property line. So if your deck is under 36 inches high, we understood that you have to be 9 inches from the property line. So
9 feet.
9 feet, I'm sorry, 9 feet from the property line. Our deck is 32 inches at its beginning point, and then towards the end, it becomes 44 inches. So the ordinance uses an average of those two numbers, which comes out to 3 feet 2 inches. And because of that 2 inches, the setback automatically, they use 4 foot, which
They round up to 4 feet.
right, which automatically increases the setback from 9 feet to 11.
But the height of the deck never actually changes. It's just the grade of the property. So our yard is sloped downward. So the deck isn't elevated that we're seeing any higher. It stays on one flat surface. It's just that the ground underneath is graded on a slope.
All right, the increase in height is only to compensate for the decrease in grade.
The deck is one level all the way across.
Yeah, there's no step up or anything.
And the backyard is lined with Aberrani trees, so you can't see the deck from any of our neighbors' yards.
Yeah, I did see your photos and I thank you both for your candidness and the forthright testimony. The board is quite familiar with these situations. All corner properties have 2 front yards.
Right.
It's a front yard in your mind, you think where the front door is, but in technical terms, and Mr. Gill is going to give you a brief explanation of that, and he'll remind the board about it. But
I just wanted to go ahead. I'm sorry. Then I just wanted to also add that as the deck goes down in our yard, our property does widen and it does satisfy the setback. It's just the beginning area that's the cause for concern.
understood. Yeah, we have copies of your survey, so we're able to see that.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Let me go to Mr. Gill now at this point. He'll give an explanation to the board and you'll probably hear some technical issues that he'll speak to. Mr. Gill.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. Del Duca. Nice to see you again. Okay. First, I'd like to say that while this was born of work being done without permits, technically, as soon as we made Ms. Del Duca and Mr. Del Duca aware, they came in immediately, and it was painstaking because there was a lot of things that we were trying to figure out. But and there's been a lot of improvements. I think Ms. Del Duca is being modest in some of the improvements they've made. They've made a wide range of improvements to the home, and most of them are benign in that they didn't need any type of permitting and stuff like that. So they've beautified the home, and they've been doing it pretty systematically. So I do applaud them for that. But yeah, they've been very, very active in trying to correct this. At one point, the Del Ducas did provide us with an alternate deck design that kind of cut out a good chunk of the deck as you guys are seeing it, as the board is seeing it this evening. So it was considerably smaller in its shape to try to accommodate the setback requirements. What Ms. Del Duca didn't touch on is that the setback requirements for decks is scaled in her zone based on the height of the deck off the grade will dictate what the setback is. And it starts at 7 feet. So What she was alluding to that I'd like to put a little bit finer point on is that if her deck was at the 36-inch, I'm sorry, was at the 2-foot mark or less, she would be okay with a 7-foot setback. But because a portion of her deck is taller, it's at 44 inches. When we average that out, she comes out to the height that she had put on the record, and those couple of inches that put her over that limit meant that she is now beholden to the higher standard of 9 feet. And at that point, it just required too much on her part to concede on the existing deck that she was doing, and really beyond that, the overall feel of the deck. So that's why they're here this evening. But to read my my denial letters, because we did issue 2 denial letters. Ms. Del Duca applied for 2 separate applications. The first, the applicant proposes to legitimize a deck that was previously constructed. The applicant has constructed a 460 square foot approximate deck, 4 foot high. The deck is 8 feet from the rear yard property line where 11 feet is required. The applicant will require a C variance. So the technical issue is that she's required 11 feet because of the height and because of the way her yard is configured. She only has an 8-foot proposed setback. Another point that I'd like to point out is that this is going to play into the fence conversation as well, but her property is oriented towards Concord, not towards the main road, which is, what's the main road there? Southwood. So Southwood, where she's asking for the fence, that's the area that, you know, when you look at the orientation of the home, one would suspect would be the rear yard, but is actually technically a side yard. And that's where a little bit of her issue also arises. If she was in a rear yard situation, she'd have more room because the building, she has more of a setback opposite Southwood or on the right side of the home. But because that's the way her house is oriented, that's where the deck makes the most sense. The second deficiency letter was in regard specifically to the fence. The applicant has submitted a zoning permit application to legitimize a 6-foot vinyl fence with a lattice top that was previously constructed without permits. The fence was constructed in the primary front yard where a maximum of 4 foot, 50% open is permitted. The applicant will require a C variance along with any other variances, waivers, and/or exceptions. As Ms. Del Duca stated, there was an existing chain link fence that was 4 foot high. Through their research, they decided to replace in kind. Didn't think that they needed a permit at that point. You know, at some point thereafter, I think she said something to the tune of 7 months later, it was discovered that she did this, and we alerted her to that fact. Again, the house is oriented towards Concord. One would presume that the side yard and rear yard that's really usable for purposes of recreating is on the Southwood side. However, the way our ordinance is structured presently, her primary front yard is defined as the narrower street frontage. That's the street frontage that is the least wide adjacent to a street. So even though her house is oriented towards Concord and that's her mailing address, her legal address for purposes of determining these yards is the Southwood side. The reason that is important is because as of right, she could construct the fence she wants to construct in front of her home on Concord and create a boxed in courtyard in front of her house. I don't think anybody would agree that that would look appropriate. And normally she would be able to avail herself of the exception in the ordinance that would allow her to put the 6-foot fence in the secondary front yard, but because this one is primary, she cannot. And restructuring the fence would have meant ripping up a very nice fence. So she opted to come to the board and try to solicit a variance. She also presented to my office, which is, I believe, part of your packet in the addendum sheet, a series of photos of the neighborhood, which I don't think she really talked too much about, other than to say that it's a very common aesthetic in the neighborhood development that she lives in. So she that further bolstered her idea that what she was doing was in line with what the neighborhood allows and permits.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. Yeah, that if you go up and down Southwood and in an area it's quite common. I don't know that anybody puts up 4-foot fences anymore, and it's no matter where you walk, it's 6. And I know our ordinance says 4 there, but there might be some matter that we might want to think about moving forward on recommendations in an annual report. However, dealing with this matter at hand, would you agree that the uniqueness of the property there lends to a bit of a hardship? The the deck comes, because it's not canted, but because the land drops off on the one end, it's creating this situation where otherwise it would have been permitted.
Yes, if
Okay.
she would have had the proper height
Right,
throughout her deck, she
Right.
would be able to build this deck as of right,
thank you.
or
And-
or
and
or
with-
only make it with minor modifications.
Right. And with regard to the fence, the only violate is the violation is that it's 2 foot over, not that it's in the wrong place, right?
Well, it is in the wrong place because we don't allow solid fences or fences above 4 feet in the front yard. So
Right.
there's actually two elements to that deficiency. I also think it's worth mentioning that her fence is latticed at the top.
Yep.
So the upper, I think, foot to 16 inches is latticed. So even though it's solid for our purposes, there is an element that is not solid.
All right, thank you for your explanation to the board, and I'm assuming to the Del Ducas would learn something from that as well. I'm going to ask the board members if there are any questions of this applicant. None. I don't see anybody's hand going up. Mr. Clancy, do you have any matter that you want to, anything you want to bring up on this?
No, it seems like Mr. Gill did a good job of fleshing this out, and certainly it seems like there's some testimony already that's been on there regarding the unique topography of the backyard, which I guess lends to this hardship application. And certainly, even when you look at a picture of the property, the way it's oriented, Mr. Gill did a very good job of explaining. Despite the fact that the front door faces one street, for zoning purposes, it's actually what would be ordinarily would be considered the side yard of the house is actually the true front yard for zoning purposes. So it's understandable how the error cropped up. So it does appear to be a little bit certainly of a hardship, and there's been good testimony about that.
Thank you. I kind of thought the same thing. Board members, any comments? I'm going to go to the public portion, absent anybody right now having anything to say. This is matter 24-2023Z. The location is 1 Concord Drive here in Old Bridge Township. This is for a deck and a fence, both requiring a C variances. The numbers you see in front of you have been placed up before. If you've been watching, if you have any particular interest in this matter, please call one of those numbers at this point. Again, this matter will come to a conclusion this evening. So if you have something you want the board to know or hear, now is the only time to do so. So please call in one of those numbers. Ms. C, do we have anybody in queue?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we'll give it a little bit of time, and in the meantime, I'll also notify the board if you haven't seen that. I think the neighbor wrote a letter of, I guess, really no interest. It's not bothering them. The fact that the deck or the fence was going to go up. Would I be correct in that, ma'am, Ms. Del Duca?
Yes, when I reached out to my neighbors, they actually weren't even aware we were building a deck. They can't, the Aberrati trees block the view from our yard into theirs and vice versa. And they indicated they had no problem with us putting up the deck. It wasn't a privacy concern for them, and they were willing to give us a letter stating such.
Right, and then that letter was part of the package, right?
Correct.
Along with the photographs.
Yes, correct.
Ms. C, has anybody called in at this point?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Mr. Clancy, we've given sufficient.
Yes, I believe we provided sufficient time for any interested parties to call in at this point. We've had the numbers displayed the entire time while I've been waiting, and it certainly isn't the first time they've been displayed tonight. So I think we are on solid ground here. If you want to close the public portion, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clancy. I am going to close the public portion at this point. Board members, any final comments? This would require, should we, well, we're going to, I assume you're asking me for a vote tonight, right?
Yes, please.
Absolutely. Okay, good. This would require two C variances, and I guess we're weighing this on, is there a hardship here? And it appears to be, and I think council appears to agree with that as well, that certainly that deck, in an ordinary situation, should the ground not come off there, we wouldn't have this problem and the uniqueness of the property. Mr. Gill, I see you with your finger up. Did you want to say something?
No, I had one of my parrots, my child came in and decided he
Oh,
wanted to have a
okay.
chat. I was just telling him to wait.
I think mine finally went to sleep. I'm not quite sure. Okay, absent Mr. Clancy, it's going to require 2C variances, correct?
Yes, it looks like it'll be one vote for the fence.
Yep.
And then the second vote for the setback on the deck.
On the deck, okay. All right, board members, we'll start with the fence. There's a 6 foot there where 4 is allowed. To the credit, I think the last 16 inches or so is latticed on the top. Is someone interested in moving that for an approval?
Motion for approval, Scogno?
Is there a second?
Second, Andrews.
Second is Ms. Andrews. Roll call, please.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Stoner,
Yes.
Ms. Chevalier,
Yes.
Mr. Scogno,
Yes.
Ms. Andrews,
Yes.
Ms. Testaverde,
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan.
Yes, and the second C variance is going to be for a setback, and that's due to the deck in the backyard, as you see in the survey. That's 11 foot required, and where 8, I think, is present because of that uniqueness. Is someone interested in allowing for the variance for the setback?
Move it, Andrews.
Is there a second?
Second, Testaverde.
It's been moved in second. Roll call, please, Ms. C.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Stoner,
Yes.
Ms. Chevalier,
Yes.
Mr. Scogno,
Yes.
Ms. Andrews,
Yes.
Ms. Testaverde,
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan.
Yes, so there won't be a resolution till the next meeting, so you can continue the construction until such time. Once again, I applaud you for your candidness. Some people try to make excuses, but I would remind everybody, and those watching at home, and I've said it before, as homeowners, if you want to do something, just call and ask. You'll probably save yourself a lot of time and a lot of misery. Your project got interrupted for certain, so it's easier to just call, look it up on the look. There's plenty of information available right online without asking anybody, but certainly all the employees of the township there in the building, they're more than willing to give people advice. So having said that, thank you for your appearance tonight. You have been approved. There'll be a resolution at our next meeting.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Okay, good night.
Good night.
Right.
Board members, I have nothing else on the agenda here. I know we have to open up a general public portion. I will do that at this time. If someone is interested in calling in, they can, again, follow those numbers and call before the board ends the meeting this evening. Mr. Clancy, anything on the legal front you want to advise us on while we're waiting?
No, I don't have any notes. We will prepare 2 resolutions that were approved tonight. We'll have them ready for the next C variance meeting and get them approved so these folks can start their projects. But that's all we really have.
Thank you for your appearance tonight, Mr. Clancy.
Always a pleasure.
Ms. C, do you have anything from the township that you want to make us aware of other than the next meeting date?
Our next meeting is on June 1st, and that's in person in the courtroom.
Okay, thank you very much. Has anyone called in, Ms. C?
No.
No, okay. We're going to close that public portion, and I'll ask if there's any board members, you could take that down, yeah. Any board members have any final comments before we call for an adjournment?
Yeah, I have something to say.
Go ahead, Mr. Stoner.
There was, I saw the email regarding to a special meeting in June.
Yes, sir.
I believe the 19th. It's a
Yes,
holiday.
Mr. Stoner, thank you. I did receive your email. Yes, June 19th is a holiday, so we won't be considering that date. We
Right.
will let you know and confirm whether we will be holding a special meeting. Again, it will only just be one. We were picking from those dates.
Right, so I came back and, either day is fine for me, but, majority.
Right, that hasn't been determined yet, that I was aware.
Yeah.
Okay, but thank you for bringing that up. Anybody else? All right, I see none. Someone want to move for recess? Adjournment, excuse me. I will. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we stand adjourned. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you at our next meeting.
Good
Thank
night.
you. Take care.
Night.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Good night.